The Pelicans' choice of Willie Green over David Griffin could define their future. Will it lead to success or mirror the struggles of a team like the Chicago Bulls? Let's break it down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday. We got a long week's worth of shows after the news from last week with Joe Dumars being confirmed on Tuesday. We'll break that down, maybe in a live show on Tuesday afternoon. Let me see if I can set that all up. But I want to look at some of the decision-making that went into Joe Dumars and keeping Willie Green, who appears to be safe, and even Zion Williamson. We're going to break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, because one thing we do not want to see this team do, no matter what, is become like a team like the Chicago Bulls. And I'll tell you why that's a bad thing in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right. Let's get into this one, because we got some reporting from Mark Stein in the Steinline newsletter, which comes from him and Jake Fisher. Basically, like, two of the people I trust the most. I pay to get their newsletter. I think it is very worth every single dollar you get with the insight you get into the league. And this mirrors a lot of what I've heard as well. So it's nice to kind of hear some of that kind of confirmation around all of this. And I want to get into one of the things that came out of here when it comes to Willie Green. And here's the quote from the newsletter here, because it's very clear that the Pelicans are actively choosing Willie Green and want him to remain. And we're going to look at why that could be a problem. Probably going to be a problem. Well, I'll explain. Let's get into this. Quote, the Pelicans process that landed on Dumars to take over their front office has garnered its own considerable share of scrutiny league-wide. New Orleans named Dumars to the exact title of his predecessor, former Pelicans Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations David Griffin, within 24 hours of Griffin's exit. Pelicans owner Gail Benson seemed to acknowledge the criticism in her statement about Joe Dumars' hire, insisting the decision was not hastily made and not without spending valuable time talking to players, coaches, and league officials. That is actually not the quote that I was looking for. Here it is. With everything. Benson countered by suggesting in her statement that she was conducting due diligence on Dumars well before letting Griffin go before the end of his contract. In hindsight, the writing was likely on the wall for Griffin's tenure, league sources say, once he presented ownership with a plan earlier this season to move on from Green in favor of associate head coach James Borrego. Sources say Griffin was denied by Benson, illustrating as loudly as ever how much support Green has from Pelicans ownership, end quote. Willie Green has that's what it is, right? Has the support of Pelicans ownership for whatever reason it is. And it seems like it has less to do with the act of coaching and more about him kind of as a person, that they chose essentially once David Griffin wanted to fire Willie Green. They chose Willie Green over David Griffin. And at that point, David Griffin probably knew that his tenure was going to be done here in New Orleans. It goes to something that if you're an everydayer of the show, if you've been listening a lot recently, I talk about lack of alignment between your front office and your coaching staff. And when that falls out of alignment, it leads to a mess, just like it is here, right? That's what this is saying. There was a lack of alignment there. David Griffin was not on the same page with with Willie Green. So they fired David Griffin, keeping Willie Green for now. But basically what that means is if you didn't want to fire Willie Green then, you're going to keep him. You are hiring someone who will align with what you want, which is keeping Willie Green and thus linking Joe Dumars and Willie Green, at least for this coming season and this offseason cycle. They're in alignment here all of a sudden, which is at least a good thing, just maybe not behind the coach. And so ownership stepped in, removed David Griffin, and got someone who didn't want to fire Willie Green to run the team. And I think even if they deny a mandate, or even if Joe Dumars in his press conference on Tuesday says like there was no mandate, there's clearly something to that, right? This is ownership. I don't want to say choosing a side because it's not exactly like it was like one or the other had to go, because both could go, but it's very clearly ownership choosing Willie Green. You know, if this team wants to get into playoff contention next year, you better hope Willie Green is the guy. Otherwise, it's going to set you back, and we're going to get into this in the next segment here when we look at kind of comparing the Pelicans to the Chicago Bulls. And the Bulls are in this awful purgatory of the NBA of never being too bad, but never being that good either. Look, if you're looking for a devil's advocate with Willie Green here, we've never seen Willie Green coach a fully healthy team. So I don't know if we truly know whether Willie Green is a good or bad or somewhere in the middle coach. It's kind of incomplete based on the injuries that we've seen from him. But have we seen enough to say Willie Green is definitely one of those top coaches? And I think like there's nothing that gives indication that yes, he is. And you can see how coaching changes can make an immediate impact if you're running it back with the same roster. And maybe the Pelicans are, maybe not. We'll look at Zion Williamson in the third segment here. But we've seen how coaching changes can make an immediate impact. Look at both the Pistons and Cavaliers this season. The Cavs had the best record in the East. All they did was change their head coach. The Pistons went from literally one of the worst seasons in NBA history to making the playoffs, not even through the play-in tournament, but as an outright 6th seed, and a massive improvement by just changing their head coach and adding in a few other things. You know, you can even look at Joe Mazzulla with the Boston Celtics after they fired Ime Udoka after 1 year, and he took them to the finals. That team won 51 games. But in his 3 seasons as head coach, Joe Mazzulla has won 57, 64, and now 61 games. So it's an improvement there. You can see an immediate impact of firing a head coach and just frankly bringing in somebody better when it comes to this, and or just the right fit maybe, because look, Cavaliers fired their coach and he went to Detroit and still doing a good job, but the Cavs also improved. So it doesn't make him a bad coach with anything like that. It's just, you know, I think there's 7 coaches in the league that actively help you win games, 7 that hurt you, and everyone else is in the middle. You know, if you don't think Willie Green is one of those top 7, and maybe he is, maybe he isn't, we don't know because he hasn't fully coached, but there's nothing to indicate that he is, then you need to be finding one of those top 7 guys or the next one that's going to be in that group. And that's not something the Pelicans are doing here. And it looks like, let's just do right by this kind of person here, the coach that we like. And look, there's something to be said for that. But at the end of the day, you got to win games. And the team has not been able to do that. You can go back to when they were pretty healthy 2 years ago, losing to the Thunder in the first round before you saw Zion Williamson get hurt. But even over the final, 2 weeks of the regular season, they struggled all they needed was one more win to avoid the play-in tournament. One more win to avoid the play-in tournament, and they couldn't get that. It looked like they kind of forgot how to play basketball down that stretch, and they looked pretty bad at times in some of those games. And that's when they were healthy. That's pretty concerning and probably the part we want to look at the most when it comes to head coach Willie Green. But by keeping him, you're not getting one of those top guys, and it sounds like you're trying to run it back, but you're not going to get that bump of a new head coach by running it back. What's that mean? That means a play-in tournament next year. Look, I like the postseason. It's fun. I want to see the Pelicans back in there. But you better hope Willie Green is who you think he is with a healthy roster to elevate you, because otherwise you become the Chicago Bulls. And I got stats that tell you that ain't where you want to be. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, you know what time it is? Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. And DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order for $20 or more and use code Wingstop50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. You ever ordered on one of those apps and then you look at the final total of your order and you're like, how did that get so expensive? How did that double what I was paying for just a burger or something like that? If you ever thought there's got to be a better way, there is with Dash Pass. $0 delivery fees and exclusive perks like this one. Think about how much you could save over the course of an NBA season. So here's the play. Sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 or more in a playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with an order of $20 or more and code WINGSTOP50. That's Dash Pass. Your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And don't forget about the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. No playoffs, but a pivotal offseason, including maybe a Zion Williamson trade, some lottery stuff that we'll get into in a minute here. The future can still be pretty bright in New Orleans. So stay up to date on all offseason news, draft coverage, and expert analysis by subscribing to the Locked On Pelicans newsletter. Plus, you could win big. Subscribe between April 7th, 2025 and April 30th, 2025 for a chance to win one of these amazing prizes. $2,500 Best Buy gift card, a $300 Game Time gift card, or $200 to Fanatics for hopefully a Cooper Flag jersey. Exclusive insight into free agency draft coverage and team updates delivered straight to your inbox. Join the Locked On Pelicans newsletter for trusted coverage every single day. Subscribe to enter by clicking the link in the description down below or go to lockedondaily.com. So here's what the Pelicans are kind of charting their course on and probably likely going to end up, and I don't love this, and that's being the Chicago Bulls. And I don't mean the Chicago Bulls of the Michael Jordan era with 6 championships in an 8-year period. I mean the Chicago Bulls recently. And the Chicago Bulls recently, since, say, the 2015-2016 season has been not great, to put it mildly. This is a team that during that stretch has 2 playoff appearances, and they've lost in the first round each time. If you look at longest NBA playoff series drought, so time since a playoff series win, I'll run down the list here for you. The Charlotte Hornets are at 21 years. Last time they won a playoff series was 2005. Sacramento Kings are at 21 years, 2005. The Pistons are at 16 years, TBD on them, 2009. The Orlando Magic, 14 years, 2011. The Chicago Bulls are on a 10-year drought of winning a playoff series since 2016. I'll get to the Pelicans here just so you see it. The Spurs and Wizards are tied for 8 years at 2018. And the Pelicans are 7, so this is the 8th longest active drought right now at 2019 without a playoff series win. It looks worse if you look at it in terms of, not for the Pelicans, but for like longest playoff droughts. Pelicans are only at 1 year, whereas a lot of other teams are not at that kind of period right now. We're looking at just series win. I bring up the Chicago Bulls because this is a team that, has not been outright as bad as the Hornets or Kings or Pistons or even Magic for a period of time. They've been competitive. They've been in the play-in tournament and all of that, but they still haven't been able to kind of make meaningful moves of getting out of that just mediocrity in the NBA. And the worst place I think you can be in is kind of just perennially being a play-in tournament team. Means maybe you get in and you get blasted out of the first round. Look at what just happened to the Pelicans last year, to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Look at the Memphis Grizzlies this year. They just lost by 51 in their opening game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. You do all of that, you get into the playoffs, and you get swept in 4 games, like the Pelicans last year. And that looks like what's going to happen to Memphis this year. OKC has to be like historically good. But then say you lose in the play-in tournament, like the Bulls. Cool. That's great. You're in the lottery, right? That's awesome. You can get a first-round draft pick. Congratulations on having the 12th best lottery odds and a 8% chance at the top 4 and a 1.7% chance at the #1 overall pick. And when you look at their history of the draft, right? I just went over their kind of playoff wins draft. Since 2015-16, that year they were 42-40, didn't make the playoffs. Next year, they lost in the first round by going 41-41. Then they were 27-55, 22-60, 22-43. Then they were 31-41. They made the playoffs under Billy Donovan his second year in 2021-2022 at 46-36. Then next year, 40-42, 39-43. This year, 39-43. In some of those years, they made the postseason or they made the play-in tournament, but they have not been able to make any meaningful progress for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seasons. 10 seasons. without any meaningful progress. And you look at their draft picks and it kind of plays out in the way that you would think. 2019, they drafted Kobe White in the first round. He's finally kind of coming into his own. 2020, they drafted Patrick Williams, 4th overall. That was supposed to be the franchise cornerstone. And then from there, they made short-sighted win-now moves, didn't have a first-round pick in 2021. In 2022, when they went 46-36 and lost in the first round of the playoffs, they had the 18th overall pick and drafted Dalen Terry. And what good did it do? Because of their nearsighted trades, they didn't have a first-round pick in 2023. And then last year, after going 39-43, not even making the, play-in tournament and all of that, this is a team that, just has done basically nothing, in my opinion, when it comes to it, right? They drafted, they had the 11th overall pick, and those aren't the picks that are just going to, give you enough of what you need, at all, to improve. And that's where they're just stuck. They have enough of a roster to win them between 35 and 42 games every year, but you're never going to get out of that. You need those top draft picks. This is why tanking is such a thing in the NBA. Bottoming out and a rebuild is rather important to getting one of those top 5 picks where you can get the blue chip prospect that you can build around. And because of the Bulls trying to kind of go for it every year, they are trapped in this level of mediocrity. They've needed to blow it up for a while and just tank on down and end up, hopefully, with a top overall draft pick. Watch me sim this on Tankathon and the Bulls end up there. No, Pelicans actually have the 2nd pick. Washington first. That'd work. The Pelicans need to avoid this, right? If you're running it back with Willie Green, you're hoping he improves and is a good coach. But when you look at this roster and what it could be next year, with an injury to DeJounte Murray to start the year. So you're going to need to spend some more resources on a point guard, whether that's your one free agent signing that you're really going to get or a draft, just to kind of plug that hole for right now. That's not conducive to building a long-term sustainable success, to use the words of David Griffin, when it comes to it. Where does this team go from here by running it back with the same head coach and for the most part the same roster? And look, if you trade Zion Williamson, yeah, maybe you get players that play more than 30 games, but you're not getting any of them that have the top end talent that Zion Williamson does. And this team is fooling themselves if that's what they think. You want to avoid what the Bulls are going through right now, because when you look at it, yay, Josh Giddey looks good. Don't get me wrong. But is there anything about the Chicago Bulls team that makes you go oh yeah, they're going to make a leap in the coming future? There's nothing about them that says that with the way that their roster is right now. So when you look at that, so what? Kobe White looks great. Don't get me wrong. Him and Josh Giddey and Vucevic, sure. But there's nothing else there. Patrick Williams has struggled with being healthy and all of that and hasn't looked like the player that, you thought he was going to be. This is a team that just can't get out of there because who's your cornerstone player? Look, it's not Josh Giddey. It's not Kobe White. At this point, it's not Patrick Williams. Who is it? They don't have that. Where they're not going to find it, probably, is with the 12th overall pick in this draft. You're not looking at a guy that's going to be a difference maker like that. 12th overall is going to get you someone like Jace Richardson, Colin Murray Boyles out of South Carolina. So what? None of those guys are going to be the difference maker that you need them to be. And so that's something that the Pelicans are kind of charting their course on. If they're nearsighted, we're going to push for it next year, we're going to get back into the playoffs. Look, I want postseason basketball. Even 2 games is fun for me. Don't get me wrong. Even when you get swept, I still enjoy it. I don't know. We had fun. I had fun at the very least, right? Even the talk leading up to it, doing the live show and everything we did at Mid-City Yacht Club last year, where 100 of y'all showed up just to talk Pelicans. It was awesome. That stuff should matter. But you also do need to think long-term and not just short-sighted, and that's what I'm worried that this team is doing right here. And so rather than trying to force it, which is what this team feels like they're going to try and do. I am worried that if you end up with the 6th overall pick, you're going to trade that and kind of go from there, right? Let's just trade it away. Maybe then build around Zion Williamson, or think we can trade Zion and that pick for a difference. I don't even know. You come to me for the expert analysis of here's what the team's doing. Let me try and explain it. And I'm even a little bit lost of what kind of course they're trying to chart right now. I think we can kind of read between the lines of all of it. but I don't know if it makes the most sense. You can hear the breath in me there. The way it should be, rather than trying to force it, like they're trying to, it's like square peg, round hole, like we're going to make this work, is the draft lottery should dictate what you do. And also, by the way, there's another really telling line from that Mark Stein, Jake Fisher newsletter. I'll tell you what that is. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel has given new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking the teams I think are going to go far in the playoffs, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, giving up the points there sounds like the smart move every time, but you can also get in on the player props, from 3-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. And after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today when your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And now for your second listen, Locked On Saints. What are the Saints doing in the draft? The draft's this week. What are they going to do? Please take a QB somewhere. That would make me happy. Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, making sense of everything black and gold, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I just talked about how it feels like the Pelicans are trying to force things. They're just trying to force it because for whatever reason that, they want to get back into the playoffs. And I get that. I want them in the playoffs, right? But you got to avoid being a play-in tournament team perpetually, which is, look, until this year, basically what the Pelicans have been. They've been in the play-in tournament the 3 previous years. What is that getting you a difference maker, right? Cool. We get a couple extra home games, but when you look at the Pelicans then draft choices of some of this, well, they went a little win now by trading away Dyson Daniels, and that wasn't even their pick with it. That came from the Los Angeles Lakers. When you look at the Pelicans draft picks, right, like that is not the difference makers that you hope when it comes to that. And that's something I'm trying to pull up their draft stuff. And let me see where that went to see if we can find it here. I'll find it in a minute. And you look at guys like Yves Missi, good player, not a big difference maker, at least right now. Jordan Hawkins, not the difference maker that you want, but that's where you're picking 14, 17 in the 20s when you're going through this play-in tournament stuff. And that's not ideal for this team whatsoever. And that's why you need to really kind of pick a direction. So rather than trying to force it like the Pelicans feel like they're doing right now, the draft lottery should dictate what this team does. If you end up with a top 4 pick and a guy that you feel is a cornerstone player, Cooper Flagg is, I think Dylan Harper is, I even think Ace Bailey is too, if you don't have Zion Williamson on the team. Great. Draft that player. And don't then make short-sighted win-now moves like the Bulls did. They drafted Patrick Williams, made short-sighted win-now moves, and that left them without first-round picks in 2 years to kind of build more off of. Their timeline's weird. Vucevic doesn't fit the timeline of that team. Kobe White's eventually not going to fit the timeline of that team, potentially, too, with what his extension might be and Giddey's extension. So when you look at that, align yourself better. It comes down to alignment in so many different ways. And this is something that I've been talking about for like a month now, it feels like. Align yourself properly. You get Ace Bailey, not Ace Bailey, let's say Dylan Harper, who I'm really, really high on, second overall, please. Be bad next year too, and get him a running mate in the next draft. And then all of a sudden, these two can grow together and ascend in a better way than what you have. The Pelicans tried that a little bit around Zion Williamson, right? You had a bunch of first-round picks, and none of those guys truthfully worked out. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a nice role player, but wasn't kind of like the number 2 to Zion. Jackson Hayes, lest we say they're the better right? Sometimes you miss on those, but then you found Trey Murphy and he could have been that guy, but the injuries have derailed all of it. So get a guy that's healthy and then keep kind of being bad for a year or two and build through the draft here. Don't force yourself to be good and just be a play-in tournament team, because when you force it, that can often just be your ceiling. And then you're never able to get out of that. You'll be good, maybe in the playoffs one year, and enjoy the 20th overall pick in that draft where your ceiling is now getting lowered and lowered and lowered. And maybe your floor is being raised up a little bit, but your ceiling is being lowered and there's a cap on what you can see this team doing. And that's kind of what the Pelicans are falling into right now. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. I do want to say something here. This one kind of blew me away here. When it came to some news out of Mark Steinline newsletter, Substack, when it comes to this. I was going to leave with this because I don't want to get too much into this just because really. Quote, and this is regarding the hiring of Joe Dumars as quickly as it was, and I've blasted literally everywhere in the city, blasted the process behind it. We did the show on Friday of why Joe Dumars could be perfect. Maybe he's good, maybe he's not. But the process was bad, even if he ends up being good. And then eventually it just won't matter because the results are what matters more than anything else. Quote, perhaps Benson's strongest counter to those critical of her speedy process to bring Dumars back to the front office world from his role in the league office. Sources say Sacramento also had Dumars high on its list of potential replacements for Monty McNair. Dumars and Scott Perry, who they hired, who worked in tandem during Detroit's lengthy run as an Eastern Conference power in the 2000s, both had stints with the Kings after leaving the Pistons. End quote. I can't even tell you how frustrating that paragraph is to me. Doing something because the Kings were maybe going to take your guy, or the guy that you were kind of hovering around and circling around. Yeah, just because the Kings, if the Kings are trying to hire somebody, it means you should not hire that person. I was on Locked On NBA game night on on Friday. So that's what I do here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make that your second listen today. We ripped the same thing. Their process was bad. That's such a pivotal hire, and you just hire anybody, or you just hire someone quickly without going through the full process to make sure you got the hire right. Maybe it's Scott Perry, maybe it's Joe Dumars, but you at least need to make them beat out other people for the job. And that's not what they did here. Notice in the Pelican statements where we talked to players, front office people, and coaches, they didn't talk to a single other executive because they weren't allowed to talk to a single other executive about who they should hire, because those people are under contracts and you can't just go and interview without getting permission from the team. And no team was going to do that during the season. And if the Pelicans started this process when David Griffin was asking to fire Willie Green, you didn't interview or even consider other people. You just picked Joe Dumars. And then it was we got to do this fast, so we can't even go through the process of making him interview and do all that because we're worried the Kings are going to hire him. The Kings, by the way, as we said, have a 21-year playoff win drought. They went playoffs all time. A 16-year, it's literally the longest in NBA history, 16 years without making the postseason. From 2007 to 2023, 16 years they didn't make the postseason. And you're going to be like, well, that team's going to hire this person. Let's get it before they can get him. Kings don't make good moves. They have a very meddling owner and a very dysfunctional system. You shouldn't be trying to beat them to anything because they're not making the correct moves, and that really says something. Doing something because the Kings were interested means you should probably do the opposite. It's been a week, y'all. But look, we're going to hear from Joe Dumars on Tuesday. He's going to have to answer a lot of questions here. We'll probably start to understand his vision when it comes to everything. So I'm looking forward I will be there. I'm looking forward to that. And we'll, of course, do a show, maybe a live show Tuesday evening, kind of recapping all of that and everything that we saw. So that's more to come here on Locked On Pelicans. We'll, of course, kind of preview his press conference in tomorrow's show. So a whole lot to cover here. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And as always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. And I'll be back with y'all tomorrow. And we got a lot to cover the rest of the week. See y'all next time.